Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. Time for something slightly different for this channel. If you're a regular viewer, and I hope you are, then you will have picked up that this is sort of a retro tinged channel. We lean more towards classic TV and classic films, and it's nice to remind people of shows and films and things that they watched as youngsters and with the passage of time they've forgotten about. And it's really nice to get those messages from people saying, I'd forgotten the show, I used to love watching this. Triggering memories is one of the things that this channel's all about, but it's also about new stuff because there's some great new films and TV out there, and I'm aware that when I do videos on newer stuff, they're not quite as popular as some of the older things, but that doesn't mean to say I don't want to talk about them. And today I'm going to talk about two TV shows which, no matter what you think about modern TV, no matter how wedded you are to classic TV and classic films, you need to watch these two TV shows. Let's talk about them. Yes, welcome back. My name is Paul Mount. This is my world of stuff. If you are new here, why not like and subscribe? We deal with loads of, I say we, it's me. I talk about loads of classic films and classic TV. There's always Doctor Who content, but I do like to keep one foot in the modern world. I like to see what's going on. I watch a lot of modern TV because a lot of modern TV is actually very good, particularly if you're a fan of genre, imaginative fantasy stuff. I don't do detectives, I don't do soaps, I don't do those routine procedural things. They don't do anything for my noggin, but I like something that fires up the imagination and gets you thinking. And there are two shows around at the moment that I'm recommending that you take a look at. Even if you would rather watch something from the 60s or the 70s, and I understand there's a huge market for that, there are some great shows out there, and these two in particular I really want to put a flag up and say give these a chance because you won't regret watching these two shows. So if you are new, press that subscribe button, press that like button, leave a comment, stick around for the journey because there's some exciting stuff coming. I'm not entirely sure what yet, but there are loads of things coming up on this channel. I ain't going nowhere. First issue I have to talk about, I think, in discussing these shows is the vexed issue of spoilers, because it's very hard to talk about certain shows, and it's sort of quite hard to talk about these two shows without giving out spoilers, or at least spoiler warnings, and it's a tough one these days. My view has always been in terms of spoilers. Well, look, once something is released, once something is out there, it's up to you, if you haven't seen it or watched it or read it, to avoid spoilers, avoid reviews, avoid anybody talking about these things. But even that seems a little difficult and a little unfair because not everybody's able to watch things immediately. People have all sorts of commitments, and people sometimes have things that they don't watch for weeks and sometimes months. God knows I've got shows that I've never seen, from 4, 5, 6, even longer, still sitting there in the back of my mind is, I must watch that one day. So I understand that it's very hard to be on top of everything. So, because the days of people watching TV on 3 or 4 channels and then talking about them at work the next day, so everybody knew about them, those days disappeared really with the advent of the video recorder back in the 70s, when people were able to record shows and watch them later. And of course now with catch-up services, streaming services that have shows available pretty much permanently, there is no huge imperative to watch something as soon as it arrives. So dealing with spoilers is a little harder because you have to take that into account. The two shows I'm talking about today, although they're being watched and they're popular, there are lots of people who haven't got to them yet and possibly want to get to them. And although it would be easier for me to be able to say, yeah, this happens and that happens, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to spoil these shows for you, because the first one in particular, what you get out of it very much depends on a revelation that happens in the first episode that suddenly puts the series into an entirely different perspective. So I'm going to talk about both these shows in fairly broad terms, with the understanding that these are great shows that you should watch, because they really, one of them in particular represents the best of modern genre television. And I even saying genre is a bit of a spoiler in a way. But this first one is quite clearly going to be one of my top TV shows of the year. When I do my end of the year rundown of top 10 TV and films, this is going to be, at the moment, it's number one. Number one, my top TV show of the year so far. We're only in March. There's all sorts of treats to come, I'm sure. But at the moment, this show's going to take some beating. The other one is the return of an old character in an old show that's been resurrected and is also extremely good. Whether it's going to be in my top 10 yet, I don't know. but on the basis of the 3 episodes I've now seen, it's shaping up to be something extremely good. Enough of this flim flam and fluff. Let's get on with talking about these shows. The first one I want to talk about is called Paradise, which is currently streaming on Disney+. Both these shows are Disney+. What's interesting about this show is actually made by Hulu in America, and I think it's being distributed worldwide on Disney+. Certainly in the UK it is. This is actually quite similar to the Doctor Who deal, interestingly. The Doctor Who is made by the BBC and Bad Wolf Productions in Cardiff, but is distributed worldwide by Disney+. And as I said, I suspect that this is what's happening with this show. It's on Disney+. It's 8 episodes. The 8th and final episode dropped last week. I think it opened with 2 episodes and it's been episodic ever since. And I do like that release strategy. I like having a new episode of a show every week because it harkens back to the old days when you didn't get an entire series dumped in your lap. You had to wait and be patient and watch the series play out. And I think some of the streamers are now going back to that model because I think particularly Netflix shows sometimes suffer because they plop the whole lot on the screen. There's a buzz for a week or so and then it fades. And I think if you have a show, it seems common sense to me, if you have a show that runs for 8 weeks, that's 8 weeks worth of talk about the show. That's 8 weeks worth of publicity for the show. It's 8 weeks worth of momentum building. And I think if you just splat a show out there, that's it. And then you move on to the next one. When a show develops its season across a number of weeks, it's obviously got more time to grow and flower. And I think that's what Paradise has done. Anyway, what is Paradise all about? That's what you really want to know. It's a series created by Dan Fogelman and it stars Sterling K. Brown. He's a terrific actor who I'm vaguely aware of. He appeared in things like the first Black Panther film. He also appeared in Shane Black's The Predator, but don't hold that against him. He's done lots of episodic TV. He's done loads of films. But this is his biggest thing that he's done in terms of the fact that he is the star of it. He plays Xavier Collins. He's the lead agent on the US President's Secret Service security detail. And the series starts at the home of the president's quarters, president's residence, and the president hasn't got up that morning. He's late getting up. Xavier he's the head of the president's security detail, and he's trying to wake the president up. He goes to his quarters, knocks on the door. No reply, knocks on the door. It's 8 o'clock, it's gone 8 o'clock. He eventually forces his way into the room and finds President Cal Bradford, played by James Marsden of X-Men fame, dead on the floor in a pool of blood. Xavier doesn't panic. He doesn't tell anybody. He doesn't reveal what he's found for a half an hour. He spends time looking around the apartment, looking for clues, trying to find things. He finds a cigarette with a strange code on it. He finds certain things that mean nothing to us and nothing to him. Then, of course, all hell sort of breaks loose. It's sort of kept secret at first. Nobody wants to sort of make a public announcement about it yet. And slowly we meet other characters who are part of this scenario. We meet John Beavers, who plays character William Billy Pace. He's a former mercenary and he's also a trusted member of the President's security detail. We also meet Samantha Sinatra Redmond, played by Julianne Nicholson. She appears to be the world's richest self-made woman, and she is an extremely powerful woman, a woman that people are wary of and afraid of, and then they treat her very reverentially and they're very careful around her. We meet Nicole Robinson, played by Chris Marshall. She is a high-ranking civil service agent who, as we discover, was having a covert affair with the president. We also meet Dr. Gabriella Torabai, played by Sarah Shai. She's a psychotherapist and a grief specialist, and she has a particular connection with Samantha Redmond for reasons that we find out as the series progresses. And as the show progresses through its first episode, it appears to be, I suppose we could say it's like a West Wing-y political thing with a bit of 24 mystery and intrigue. Who has killed the president? Who has got into his quarters? Who has done this deed? What unfolds throughout the episode then are suspicions that something's not quite right here. There's something odd about this whole setup. And this is where I have to tread very carefully because I don't want to blow the gaff on this. And when the gaff is blown at the end of episode 1, it's a real what the, who the, why the, what? WTF moment. Because it's not something that you would necessarily expect. There are hints and clues about certain things that we see and think, that's weird, what's this, what's that? Now I knew broadly what this was about because I stumbled across an interview with the star in a magazine which made a reference to what this show is, and I thought, sounds interesting, I'm going to have a look at that. And for the first 3 episodes I got more and more involved, and the first 3 episodes are quite slowly paced because they're spending time developing the characters and explaining a bit about the characters and who they are and how they came to be where they are in the narrative. And then the doors are blown off in episode 4, which is absolutely astonishing. It delves into the background of William Billy Pace's character, this mercenary, this tough young man who works for the security detail, who has a dark past. And we explore that dark past and how it's impacted upon what's happening here. That's the first episode of this series where I thought, wow, this is actually really good. Whereas before it had been, I'm enjoying this is intriguing and a fascinating idea. Episode 4 is made in such a way that it really is so clever in the way it tells its story of this character and what occurs. And you suddenly realise what a clever piece of writing that episode is. And then it makes you look at the earlier episodes in a slightly different light. I won't say a lot more about what happens after that. It's just that every episode gets better and better and more exciting as you suddenly, the whole scenario starts to close in. And we suddenly realise a bit more about all these characters and where they fit into this sort of chessboard of what's going on in the story. Episode 7 then is also astonishing because that's a flashback episode. And that's an important flashback episode because everything leads to where we are at the beginning of the series. And again, it explores the relationship between Xavier and the president, which appears to be a hostile one. We discover why it's a hostile one. We discover why it wasn't originally. There are lots of flashbacks, I will warn you of this. And they're not highlighted. All of a sudden, we're back in the past and you have to be pretty fleet of foot to catch up with those things because all of a sudden you think, oh, okay, we're here now. We're back there and we're back here and we're back there. So you've got to be pretty sharp to keep up with it. It's not one to watch on your phone and look at the screen occasionally because you will go adrift very quickly. The 7th episode, as I say, is absolutely stunning. It is my favourite hour of TV this year. Breathtaking because it deals with a subject which I am particularly fond of. I will say no more than that. If you're familiar with this channel, you might have an idea what that might be. And then the 8th episode is a spectacular and thrilling, exciting ending, which leads on to the 2nd season, which was commissioned very quickly. And what I'm pleased about is that series, 2nd series, is about to start filming. And it'll be on air at the same time next year in January. And the producer, Dan Fogelman, specifically said, look, I'm sick to death of these streamers or these channels that have these really successful hit shows, and then you've got to wait 3 years for the next series. Why? Once a show is successful as recommissioned, just get on with it. So remember the old days of network TV in America and in Britain, you'd have a new run of shows every year. And on network TV, you would have shows that would run for 22, 26 episodes. And every year they'd come back for another run. Now, of course, we are talking about bigger budget, bigger productions. You know, the shows are bigger in scope now than the network TV stuff from the 90s and 2000s. But even so, if you watch a good show and you like it, you want to see it back quickly. I'm thinking of Stranger Things. When that comes back, could be end of this year, could be next year. It's going to be something like 4 years since the last season, possibly even longer. And I just think that's crazy. We're talking about TV. Just get on with it. So Dan Fogelman has said that the 2nd season will be here at the same time next year. I'm looking forward to it. I have some reservations. And again, those reservations would depend on me spoiling what happens at the end of the 1st season. But I think season 2, by definition, is going to be different. It's going to have a different style to it because of where we go at the end of the season. And I hate to sound so vague. I hate to sound so mysterious. But this is a show that you really need to just go into and explore and discover yourself. I am reminded of other shows which had very high concepts. I'm thinking of a show called Wayward Pines. It was on a few years ago, created by Blake Crouch, based on his book series, which had a fantastic USP. But once you knew what that USP was, it spanned the 1st series and you thought, that's fantastic. Didn't need a 2nd series because that mystery, that secret had been exposed. And as a consequence, the 2nd series wasn't very good and I didn't watch it all. I hope the same won't happen to this because there are still some mysteries and questions unanswered in this 1st series. And I hope we explore them in the 2nd series. But it's going to be a different 2nd series. So please, if you have 8 hours free, you won't find you've wasted them watching Paradise. Absolute brilliant series and fantastic acting. It looks fantastic. There are some good visual scenes. Again, I'm trying to avoid the major spoiler. But seriously, it's going to be one of the best shows of the year, and it's on Disney Plus right now. The other show, which I'm really enjoying, I wasn't entirely sure, but I think part 3 again solidified that into, okay, the story, I know what the story is now. I know where we're going with this. It's Daredevil Born Again. This is the 4th series of Daredevil, following on from the 3 Netflix series that were on, it seems like about 10 years ago now, which I sort of enjoyed. They were quite dark and they were quite bleak and they were extremely violent. Very much street level superhero antics from the MCU based on Hell's Kitchen, with Daredevil coming into conflict with Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. And it was a tough watch sometimes because there were 13 episodes. They were all an hour long. Netflix did those Marvel shows. You may remember they also did Jessica Jones. They did Luke Cage. They did Iron Fist. They were all 13 episode seasons. And they did feel like wading through treacle sometimes because it took so long to get anywhere. And there was so much exposition and repetition of what had happened, punctuated by bits of action. So those shows sort of flattened out and became less essential as they went on, and I don't think I actually finished the 3rd Daredevil series. But I love the Daredevil character. I really think the Daredevil character is really interesting, really fascinating. I love the old Daredevil comics, particularly the ones from the 60s. The idea of this blind superhero who, by an accident with radiation, there was a lot of that in comics in the 60s, lost his sight but had his powers and his senses accentuated by the radiation. And the idea of this blind character swinging around in his billy club, having these action scenes. He was a blind Spider-Man, basically. If you read those early comics, they are very much in that style. It could be any character. But I just find that a fascinating idea. And I think the potential has always been there for Daredevil to be a superhero series. It's never quite been that. But anyway, Marvel got the rights back to do Daredevil and recreated him for this new series, which has had some growing pains. It was originally commissioned as an 18-episode season called Daredevil Born Again. And we were going to have an 18-episode season. Wow, that's great. But then there were some problems in the filming, and I think halfway through the filming, Marvel looked at what they'd done and thought, this doesn't feel quite right. So they scrapped the episodes and started reworking it. And they've now split that 18-episode season into 2 9-episode seasons. So we've got 3 episodes out so far. And I'm really enjoying it now. I've watched the 3rd episode this morning. It's now Thursday lunchtime. And I've watched the 3rd episode, and that sort of cements where we are with this series. Again, I have to avoid certain spoilers, other than to say that Charlie Cox is back, of course, as Matt Murdock, Daredevil. It's the part that Charlie Cox was born to play. I will say that in these first 3 episodes, we don't get much Daredevil. He appears in the first sequence. There's a little bit of dodgy CGI you might want to sort of turn away from at one point. And there's one of those fight scenes that are so typical and were legendary in the original series. But we don't see him again. I mean, I'm at the end of episode 3 and there's been no sign of Daredevil yet, but there is a reason for that. Also back in the cast, we have Eldon Henson as Foggy Nelson, who is, of course, Matt's partner in Nelson and Murdoch. And we have Deborah Ann Wall, who plays Karen Page, sort of the secretary figure as she was in the comics. Also back, we have Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin. The series starts off with Nelson and Murdoch in a certain place celebrating their success. Things happen that involve Daredevil. Because of what happens, again, I'm being very circumspect because I don't want to spoil it for you. Matt gives up being Daredevil. Something happens that means he has to reinvent himself. So he sets aside his Daredevil persona and devotes himself to his legal career. Meanwhile, the Kingpin, who's had his own epiphany, he decides that he wants to become the mayor of New York. And across the first 2 episodes, we see his campaign. We see him becoming the mayor of New York. Matt Murdock, of course, is slightly suspicious of this because he's tangled with him as the Kingpin on more than one occasion. I think the best scene so far is in the first episode where Matt and Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, have this contretemps and this meeting in a cafe or a diner. And they're talking back and forth. And what they're saying to one another is full of edge and full of threat. Without explicitly threatening each other, they're both saying, keep away from me. I'm keeping an eye on you. I know what you're up to. I'm watching you. And they're both warning each other. And it's quite a chilling scene, brilliantly played by these 2 great actors. The main storyline really kicks into place in episode 2, and it starts off with an incident in the New York subway where 2 men are beating up on a 3rd man. Another character comes along who intervenes, and as a result of his intervention, or subsequent to his intervention, one of the cops falls onto the subway line and he's killed. He is arrested, charged with murder. Episodes 2 and 3 are pretty much about this courtroom drama. And Matt, who's instructed by this guy who's been arrested for murder, trying to prove that he's actually innocent and that he was trying to help. And that's how that unfolds across these 2 episodes. There's no superhero shenanigans in this. There is another costumed character that we've not met in the MCU before who is referenced. And it is a courtroom drama. It's about witness to this event who is kidnapped. And there's a fight scene at the end of episode 2 when Matt goes to find the witness, but he's already been kidnapped. And there's a fight scene with Matt Murdock and these two thugs. The third episode in particular is a very engrossing, very gripping courtroom drama where Matt is trying to get this witness into court to testify for what actually happened. It's really interesting. It's really well done. And what it does across that episode, we see also the Kingpin, who is trying to be a moral arbiter. He doesn't agree with the idea of costume vigilantes. He wants to stamp them out. And there is actually a reference to Spider-Man at one point and a reference to Daredevil. And he has this agenda where he wants to apparently clean up the city. His wife Vanessa, she's trying to pull him in a different direction. But he appears to be trying to do the right thing. So at the end of episode 3, we are set up now with, we've seen Matt as a criminal lawyer. We've seen him try to do the right thing for somebody who fell foul of corrupt police, as it turns out. And by episode 3, and again I won't spoil what happens in episode 3, I think we can see where this is going now, because things happening which are going to, I suspect, force Matt back under the Daredevil mask. He feels that he has to step up because of the corruption that's quite evident in the city and the fact that Kingpin appears to be overlooking it all, and that can't be right. It's a great series. I'm really impressed by it. It's hard to say if it replicates the feel of those Netflix series because they weren't MCU shows. They were made by different people. They had a different feel. I don't think these have quite that grittiness yet about them, but they're very real. They feel quite adults, and they're not aimed at kids. These shows aren't for kids. They're not. This is the kids' version of Daredevil. This is very gritty and tough and urban and all the better for it. And I prefer it to the Netflix shows. Having said it's not like the Netflix shows, as I said, I did find them a struggle because there were too many episodes. Pace was a bit slow occasionally. This has already got a bit more heft to it and a bit more energy to it and a bit more of a direction, because this feels, after 3 episodes, and again, you will need to watch 3 episodes to get all the strands of the characters into place and to find out why we're going to go in a certain direction. Because at the moment, Daredevil doesn't exist anymore. I think that after what happens at the end of episode 3, he will be back. So those are my 2 TV recommendations for the moment. I'm going to rate them both. I'm going to rate Paradise 10 out of 10 because I absolutely blooming loved it. Daredevil at the moment is it's an 8 out of 10. I'm really enjoying it. It's difficult with Marvel because after, 17 years of products, they're not the new kids on the block anymore. They've got to prove themselves with every project. And I think that they're turning the ship around a bit now. I enjoyed Captain America, Brave New World. Looking forward to Thunderbolts, looking forward to Fantastic Four. And I think Daredevil is shaping up to be another high quality product. Whether these shows and films will ever have that mass appeal and huge success they had at their height, I don't know. But if Marvel can make stuff as good as this, then I'm happy to stay on board for as long as possible. With the caveat that I just wish they'd do a proper, straightforward superhero versus daft supervillains series. Because Daredevil, if you look at the early Daredevil comics, they had some crazy villains like Yowl, Stilt Man, who had this sort of robotic costume with giant stilts. You're not going to get this in Daredevil. But I would love to see a proper superhero show that embraces that comic strip ethos as depicted in the Batman TV series in the 60s. And I think the candidate to do that would be Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man, played by Paul Rudd, would be terrific in a 10-part series, 5 2-part stories, each one with different silly villains in, because there's an inherent humour in the idea of Ant-Man. I think it's a shame that Marvel compromised that character with the not very good Quantum Mania film. I don't think it's a terrible film, but I think it sort of backed Ant-Man into a bit of a dead end. And I just think that's a character that is ripe for a good, fun TV superhero series in the old school style. But that's just my opinion. And I'm wandering off topic now. So I do recommend that you watch Paradise, which is a terrific piece of intelligent adult storytelling with all sorts of twists that I can't spoil, and Daredevil Born Again, which is redefining Marvel superheroes on the small screen, and I think it's going to be terrific. Right, thank you for watching. Once again, if you're new, please like and subscribe to the channel. Every new subscriber is adored by me, personally, not physically, but I do adore you all for coming on board. So please stick around, look at the back catalogue of stuff. There's loads of stuff back on this channel. Blimey, you won't believe it. So please go and have a look. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below if you want one of these gorgeous t-shirts that I know you've been admiring while I've been talking. All you need to do is click on the link in the description below, which will take you to a very easy way to pick up one of these very reasonably priced and gorgeous t-shirts. So thank you for watching. I will see you soon. There is a retro feature coming up, which I'm looking forward to getting up in the next couple of days, which will take you back to 1971. Stay tuned. I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.